Howdy folks, hope you all had a great weekend. Now forget it because it's Monday and welcome to another episode of Mingles with Jingles. Got a couple of announcements to get out of the way at first, which I really must remember because if I don't do them now I will forget before the end of the video. First things first, next week is the first Sunday in September, so next week's Mingles with Jingles will be the Salt Mine Discord live Q&A, which will be held on Sunday, the 7th. There it is. Yeah, I quickly checked the calendar. Sunday the 7th. So, as always, this is where I answer your questions. You can pose whatever question you like. I'll do my best to give you a straight answer. I make no promises. And then that will be going up as an edited version for next week's Mingles with Jingles. Speaking of the Salt Mines Discord server, I promised I would mention this. So, you may be aware that there's recently been a new update to Elite Dangerous. Apparently they've recently dropped console support, which is allowing them to do things that they could only really do on the PC version, such as, for example, this new update, which I believe is called Vanguards, has brought some very nice new features, such as squadrons. These are Elite Dangerous's version of guilds that can hold up to 600 members, shared resources through the squadron bank, and an optional purchasable squadron carrier, which the Salt Mine Squadron in Elite Dangerous is gearing up. They actually have 2 fleet carriers. They want to get one of these squadron carriers. And basically, they're posting a recruitment drive. So if you play Elite Dangerous and you're not already signed up to the Salt Mine Discord server, link in the video description, join the Salt Mine Discord server and have a look in the Elite Dangerous channel for instructions on how to join the Salt Mine Squadron in Elite Dangerous. And if you're already on the Discord server and you play Elite Dangerous and you haven't already joined the Salt Mine Squadron, and what are you waiting for? Unless, you're already in another squadron and you don't want to leave, in which case, fine, whatever. You do you. So, what's been going on in the world of PC gaming in the last week since the last episode of Mingles with Jingles? Not an awful lot. Once again, most of the PC gaming news isn't actually PC gaming news, it's all smartphone news. Such as, for example, Google announcing that they're going to do an Apple and block you from side-loading applications onto your Android phone, removing one of the primary reasons why anybody would buy an Android phone rather than an iPhone in the first place. Also, I'm with Lewis Rossman on this. I don't like the term side-loading. You're not side-loading shit. You're installing stuff onto the hardware that you own, because that's your right as an owner of the hardware. Apple famously don't like letting you do this, and now Google are doing the same shit. I mean, this is one of the primary reasons why people buy Android phones rather than iPhones. I mean, aside from being able to use SD cards and have a headphone jack and not have to pay 200 quid for a pair of fucking headphones. But aside from that, the ability to basically install whatever software you wanted onto your phone, because it's your phone, is one of the primary reasons why people use Android phones rather than iPhones. But, well, actually, the primary reason why I have an Android phone rather than an iPhone is because I don't believe in giving money to Satan. So Apple can kiss my arse. But I guess, well, the difference between Apple and Android is just getting increasingly narrow. These are the times we live in. So, yeah, not an awful lot of PC gaming news. Plenty of smartphone news, plenty of AI news. Actually, not that much AI news this week either, which is unusual. It doesn't look like anything AI related has caused any kind of catastrophic cock-ups for at least a week. So very little AI news either, which is good because I'm sick to death of hearing about AI as well. Not an awful lot as far as PC gaming news is concerned. I mean, Atomfall is getting some more DLC. I don't know if you recall Atomfall. It didn't come out that long ago and it was moderately successful. It was kind of like Fallout in Britain, just very short. So more DLC I suppose is good. Dune Awakening continues to receive updates. But I kind of stopped caring and stopped playing Dune Awakening about a month ago. I uninstalled it because even though they do keep releasing updates for it, they have, well, yet to fix the single biggest problem that once you reach endgame, there's nothing to do unless you want a PvP. And PvP in that game is utter garbage. Which is a fairly significant problem. And one that I can't believe they didn't see coming. I mean, it's not strictly true. Well, it kind of is true that there's nothing to do once you reach endgame, unless you want a PvP. Even though they've split up the Deep Desert, which is the endgame zone, into PvP and PvE areas, where you can, continue to farm endgame resources in the PvE area without getting ganked by PvPers, which is a good thing, but what's the point? What exactly are you farming those endgame resources for? Because there's nothing to do in endgame other than farm endgame resources. It's not like you actually need them to do anything other than the PvP. But if you didn't want a PvP, you see where I'm going with this? It's such an obvious problem. I can't believe they didn't see it coming. And I don't see how they're going to fix it. I mean, they need to add endgame PvE content. And that might mean turning it into a Dune version of World of Warcraft or any other kind of MMO. But there is basically nothing to do other than farm resources and then PvP, which is really, really weird. I mean, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the PvP. Well, there is stuff that's wrong with the PvP in Dune Awakening because it's crap. But there's nothing wrong with an MMO where the endgame content is all player versus player. It's just that there's basically no player versus player in Dune Awakening until you reach endgame. So they've got this amazingly good, and it is amazingly good, credit where credit's due, Funcom. They've crafted a very, very good PvE survival game that suddenly turns into the world's worst PvP looter shooter once you reach the end game, which, because of the fact that 95% of what you've done to reach the end game is strictly PvE content, they've done absolutely nothing to prepare players for. So you put all this effort to get into the end game, it's probably taken you about a month, and then you get there and you're suddenly playing a completely different game, which you're not necessarily going to like. It's certainly nothing like the game that you've been playing up to that point, which again does not necessarily have to be a bad thing. I mean, I'm not personally into PvP that much, but I'd be willing to give it a go if it was any good. And that's Dune Awakening's biggest problem, because it isn't. The majority of endgame content in Dune Awakening involves people flying around in ornithopters, loosing barrages of rockets at each other. War thunder it isn't. And then when you get into, ground combat inside crashed starships or testing stations or all that kind of shit, trying to figure out who's a player and who isn't, or who's on your side and who isn't, is next to impossible. And even when you do find an enemy player, because the damage that your skills do to another player is so massively nerfed compared to the damage that you do to non-player characters, it's next to impossible to actually kill anybody. Oh, it's just horrible. It's so bad. And I cannot believe that they didn't see it coming. I mean, they did extensive testing prior to release. How did this not get flagged up? But, well, whatever. Good luck, Funcom. Your problem. Sort it out without me. I've got better things to do. So, given the relative lack of... I mean, it's not that there hasn't been any news since last week's episode of Mingles with Jingles. It's just there hasn't really been any news that I give a shit about. And if you're anything like me, and most of you are, or you wouldn't be here listening to me, there probably hasn't been an awful lot of news that you would give a shit about either. So instead of talking about smartphones or AI, because fuck that, let's talk about a couple of subjects that both amused and terrified me this week. I saw this meme. I can't remember where it was. Doesn't really matter. It might have been on a Discord server somewhere. What you think 30-year-old science fiction looks like, and what 30-year-old science fiction actually looks like. And the image is in the meme, and I have to admit, this hit close to home. What you think 30-year-old science fiction looks like was the original Battlestar Galactica. The one starring Lorne Greene, Dirk Benedict and Richard Hatch that was released to cash in on the success of Star Wars. Yeah, that's not 30-year-old science fiction. That's 47-year-old science fiction. That came out in 1978. Do you know what 30-year-old science fiction is? Star Trek Voyager. Do you feel old yet? And speaking of Battlestar Galactica, and man, this one hit close to home. So, earlier this morning, I was playing World of Warcraft Classic. And as I was doing my daily quests, I mentioned this what you think 30-year-old science fiction looks like meme to the guys in my guild chat. And one of them said, What do you mean, the old Battlestar Galactica? He was like, how many Battlestar Galacticas are there? There's actually 4 if you count the movie. The original Battlestar Galactica that came out in 1978. Then there was the very short-lived Galactica 1980. And then, of course, there was what I keep referring to as the new Battlestar Galactica, the one starring Edward James Olmos as Admiral Adama and Katie Sackhoff as Starbuck, etc., etc., which is the only Battlestar Galactica this guy had ever heard of. But even though I keep referring to this as the new Battlestar Galactica, there is nothing new about the new Battlestar Galactica. It came out in 2004. That was 21 years ago. The new Battlestar Galactica came out so long ago, it isn't even on Netflix anymore. Star Wars celebrates its 50th birthday in 2 years. I wish I celebrated my 50th birthday in 2 years. Aliens. Aliens is 40 years old next year. The funny thing about Aliens, and for that matter, the original movie Alien, which came out in 1979, when I was 9 years old, and way too young to go and see it. Although I was in primary school, I was 9 years old when Alien came out in 1979. And while I obviously didn't get to see the movie while I was 9, I heard an awful lot about it. Because I can quite clearly remember my primary school teacher, her name was Miss Thornton, she went to see Alien. And she came to work the next day teaching a bunch of 9-year-olds, and all she could do was talk about Alien, a movie that she'd seen that scared the shit out of her the night before. And so she went into great detail. She was so excited. You know, she'd never seen anything like it. And there hadn't really been anything like Alien. But it made quite an impression on me. Anyway, you fast forward to 3 years, 1982, and we're emigrating to South Africa. And the night before we flew to South Africa, Alien had its UK TV premiere in 1982. And I was 12. And my parents very unwisely allowed me to stay up and watch it. I was 12. I think it's safe to say that movie made quite an impression on me. I don't think I slept for a month. Well, anyway, we emigrated to South Africa, and then we came back in 1986. So I was 16 in 1986, and that was the year that James Cameron directed the sequel to Alien, Aliens, an equally amazing but very different movie. And while I was technically 2 years too young to be allowed to go in and see it, I managed to blag my way in. Oh boy. Yeah. You can kind of understand why I have problems playing Alien Isolation. I mean, I also saw Star Wars when I was 7. Because that came out in 1977, and that had a huge influence on me as well. But I think Alien probably had a slightly bigger influence for all kinds of different reasons. Speaking of Alien, new Alien TV show, Alien Earth. I'm not going to give any spoilers. There's currently 4 episodes out. There are scheduled to be 8, so we're about halfway through. Well, we're exactly halfway through the run because maths isn't that hard. And again, I'm going to keep this spoiler-free because I do recommend you watch it. I'll just say that there are some things that happen in the first 2 episodes that I can remember watching and thinking, that's really stupid. And getting ready to be disappointed. But in the 4th episode, the things that I thought were stupid in the first 2 do get explained and do kind of make sense. Basically, the person ordering the people to do the dumb shit in the first 2 episodes, that's just the kind of arsehole they are. They don't give a shit about life, they just want to see what will happen. And that's about as much of a spoiler as I'm going to give. I'll just say, if you're an Alien fan, Alien Earth is definitely worth it. Just hold on to that. This is actually happening for a good reason for the first 2 episodes, and you'll be fine. At least I hope. It still has the potential to go horribly wrong. We are only halfway through, but so far at least, definitely worth it. Oh, actually, no, hang on a minute. There is one thing I'm not going to let Alien Earth get away with. This pissed me off. It's nothing to do with the plot of the story, but it's to do with the promotion of the TV show. I don't know who's to blame for this, but I'm not letting them get away with it. This is another case of TV and media executives treating us, the audience, like we're a bunch of drooling, window-licking idiots. Because if you look at all of the promotional material for Alien Earth, as well as the actual credits of the show itself at the beginning, it will say, written by Noah Hawley, Dan O'Bannon and Ronald Shusett. Now, I had no idea who Noah Hawley was, but he's apparently the writer and director of Alien Earth, and he's also written and directed a couple of episodes of the Fargo TV show, which is a good sign, but that's not the point. It's the other two names, Dan O'Bannon and Ronald Shusett. They're the guys that wrote Alien. Oh, so, excellent. New Alien TV show, and it's mostly written by the original writers of the original movie. It's right there on screen. They have writing credits on Alien Earth. They've said they cannot possibly have writing credits on Alien Earth, because Dan O'Bannon died in 2009 and Ron Shusett died last year. So neither of them have anything whatsoever to do with Alien Earth, despite their names prominently being displayed as writers all over the promotional material. Because of course their names are just being used quite prominently to lend an air of legitimacy to the TV show, which it didn't need because it's perfectly capable of standing on its own 2 feet, but media executives like to treat us like idiots. And it isn't until you actually watch an episode and then the end credits run where it's revealed that they didn't actually have anything to do with writing the script, because how could they? They were both dead at the time the scripts were being written. But they get a credit as being the writers of the original Alien, which provided the inspiration for Alien Earth. So, yeah, don't believe all the bullshit you hear about Alien Earth. And it's really disappointing because the show is entirely capable of standing on its own 2 feet. But, well, that's TV executives for you, I guess. Anyway, Alien Earth. In my opinion, your mileage may vary, worth it, especially if you're an Alien fan. Just don't believe the bullshit in the credits, and bear in mind that anything spectacularly stupid that appears in the first 2 episodes will be justified by the time you get to the 4th. And on that bombshell, I think that's it for this week's episode of Mingles with Jingles. I hope you've all enjoyed it. I hope it's given you something to talk about, something to think about, maybe something to argue about in the comments. See you next week for the Saltmine Discord Q&A for September. And as always, take care, and I'll catch you next time.